What's up guys, and welcome back to another Pokemon Switch video. And of course, as you can tell by the title, we are going to be talking about Eeveelutions today and the possibility of getting a new evolution in Generation 8. So the reason why we're talking about this is because looking back at history, they tend to be like every other generation. So it's, I guess, the time you'd expect it to happen. So we'll talk about what's happened in the past, what's happened in the future, and then speculate a bit on what sort of evolution we can get. So obviously the history for Eeveelutions introductions, of course we have Eevee and then its original 3 evolutions, Vaporeon, Jolteon, Flareon in Generation 1, Generation 2 followed up by adding Espeon and Umbreon, then Generation 3 was a skip, doing from Generation 3, Generation 4 however introduced 2 more as in Glaceon and Leafeon, and then again Generation 5 was a skip. Generation 6 though gave us Sylveon, the new fairy type, to go along with the new fairy type. And again, Generation 7 didn't give us anything, so we're here sitting on 8 Eeveelutions for the moment. So the general pattern, as I mentioned, is like even generations. Of course, Generation 1 is the odd one out because it was the original generation, but starting from Generation 2, it seems to be every other generation. So Generation 2, Generation 4, Generation 6, and possibly Generation 8. Of course, the reason they do this is because they don't want to have to add every single generation, because if they had, by this point they'd probably run out of types, and it's good for them to have something they can keep coming back to, Eevee particularly, because they can be like, look, it's a new evolution, buy the game. It can spike people's interest, basically. So what types are left for Eeveelutions? Of course we have 8 here, but there are 18 types in total, so technically there are 10 other Eeveelutions we could have. However, the original pattern for Eeveelutions was based on these special types. Now that was back in Generation 1, 2 and 3, or at least up to Generation 4, where types were split into physical and special types, which meant any move classed as that type. So Flamethrower was a special move because it was a fire type, however Fire Punch was also a special move because it was a fire type. So it was linked to, you know, the type of the move rather than its physical special split, which was introduced in Generation 4, which arguably made the game a lot better. But originally Eeveelutions were based on that, so all these types here, excluding Fairy of course because it wasn't introduced at that point, were special types. So Water, Electric, Fire obviously, Psychic and Dark both special, Ice and Grass both special as well. As I mentioned, Sylveon and obviously Fairy type wasn't introduced at that point, but we can imagine it probably would have been a special type, and it sort of fits the whole mantra because every Eeveelution here is a special attacker, so they seem to be focusing on, you know, special attacks in that sense. So the only remaining type from the original types that were special is Dragon, and while it's definitely possible that we could get a Dragon type Eeveelution, I don't see it being the one they had because there are other types as well. So I feel like this introduction for the next evolution might be the time where they actually introduce another type like Poison or Bug or something like that to break away from the special side. That's just one idea there. The other thing we can talk about as well as typing is evolution method, because generally Eeveelutions take advantage of a new or a unique evolution method. Of course, back in Generation 1, the Vaporeon, Jolteon, Flareon, they are evolution stone based, and that was, I guess, the big thing in Gen 1. You either evolve by leveling up or you could use an evolution stone. So that was sort of the extra special evolution there. Generation 2 with Espeon and Umbreon, well, that introduced friendship and also the day-night cycle, and of course those evolutions take advantage of both, so again that's linked in there. With Generation 4, Glaceon and Leafeon rather, they evolve of course via the Ice Stone and the Moss Stone, so they're location based, and that was again introduced in Generation 4. Of course you have Magnezone and Probopass, which again evolve at Mount Coronet, so they are location based evolutions introduced in that generation. And then of course Sylveon is the last one in Generation 6, and that evolves via Pokémon Amie basically, or Pokémon Refresh, which was introduced in Generation 6. So generally the evolution method is a new mechanic or a new method of evolution, so we can assume possibly that future Eeveelutions will evolve in a similar fashion. So we won't get, you know, a new evolution that's like, oh yeah, here's a stone to evolve it. They like to introduce it because again they can say like, oh look, it's a new evolution and it evolves a unbefore-seen way, ooh, buy the game, that's the sort of thing they go for. However, you could also have some existing evolution methods they could use. For example, ones we haven't used at all, pure leveling up, which is probably not going to happen for an Eeveelution. The only way I could see it happening is if it's a normal type Eeveelution and just like level 30 or 40, and it's a case of like if you don't evolve into anything else, Eevee just powers up, basically. That's the only time I could see it happening, but I don't think that's likely. Other ones, leveling up holding a particular item, leveling up holding with a particular move, trading, obviously just trading or trading with an item held or for another Pokemon. That's all evolution methods that are in there. Leveling up with a particular move on your roster. I believe that Sylveon has a similar aspect. You have to have 2 hearts in Amie. You also have to have a fairy type move, for example. Or you can have a Pokemon in the inventory, however, in your party. However, I don't see them really being able to link any Pokemon to an Eeveelution, because that just sort of defeats the whole purpose of an Eeveelution, because it's supposed to be unique on its own. Whereas if you're like, oh yeah, you need a Sandshrew. What happens if they always have to include Sandshrew in future games and just tethers the 2 species together, which generally isn't done, apart from I think in one case, one case where it's a particular Pokemon is like a Selgor and Carablast and stuff like that. So there are definitely links there. Other stuff, 3DS Gyroscope, of course, for evolving Malamar. Probably not going to happen because it's just one Pokemon and just doesn't make any sense. Weather-based evolution, of course we have Gudra that does that. It's definitely possible that could happen, who knows. And then, of course, there's a few other small ones like Vespiquen only being female, so you can have an Eeveelution that's only female, but again, I don't see them doing that because then that restricts the evolution itself. Or you can have some form of Eeveelutions that are based on game, so the 2 games plus and minus, one you can get a rock type evolution, one you can get a ground. Again, I don't see that happening because it restricts, and generally Eeveelutions are quite popular and need to be available to as many people as possible. So combining the evolution methods with remaining types, we're going to sort of see what we can think about. So I've got this art for these Eeveelution is awesome, however I can't find the original source. I'm going to source as best I can, but this source also sources and that page is gone, so I have no idea where it originally came from, but I'll source it best I can in the description. So here are the other Eeveelutions. So we've got a few here. Of course, we've got Fighting, Bug, Poison, Normal, Flying, Rock, Ground, Ghost, Dragon and Steel. So thinking about evolution methods possibly, I just had a few listed down, existing ones really. So for the ground type, you could level up in a Sandstorm. Eevee in a Sandstorm, you could definitely get ground from that would work. For the dragon type, you could level up holding a Dragon Fang. Again, that would be working and using a different evolution method. The only one I could think of for rock was like leveling up with Seviper in the party, because I was imagining Seviper as like a Basilisk, which would paralyze it and make it turn to stone. However, again, they're likely not going to tether it to a particular Pokemon. Of course, Seviper doesn't actually paralyze its victims according to the Pokedex, so that's the best I got. Poison type, you can level up your Eevee while it's poisoned. The only difficulty with that is sometimes you don't want an evolution method to be too easy. You don't want to have to accidentally evolve it to the poison type when actually you wanted to evolve it to Espeon later on, and that would be pretty easy for a poison type evolution while you're poisoned, because then you get poisoned when you're level 1, you level up and you've got Toxicion or whatever it would be called, which probably, again, I don't see it happening. So easy methods of evolution generally I don't see happening, but other ones, Fighting type, the only thing I can come up with was trade it for another Eevee and the Eevees fight out and both evolve. That would make no sense at all really, but that was the only thing I could come up with that would make sense. Flying type, you could level up while battling in the sky. Of course, there are no battling in the sky mechanics in every single game, so it was just an idea. Bug type, leveling up while playing portable, question mark, because again it's the Switch, I'm thinking about maybe a Switch related method. Maybe you could relate to the Joy-Cons somehow, so fighting, you could fight your Joy-Cons when you're leveling up your Eevee, who knows, I don't know. Ghost type, maybe the Eevee could faint in battle and then you get a Ghost type Eevee. Again, very easy to do, so probably not going to happen because you faint your Eevee once and you've got a Ghost type Eevee and I didn't want a Ghost type Eevee, I wanted an Espeon. It doesn't make any sense. And then finally Steel was the only one left. I'd trade with Metal Coat as an existing evolution method, but I couldn't think of anything else. But as I said, most likely the evolution method will be linked to a new mechanic or a new something in the game, a new evolution method. It might be related to the Switch, who knows exactly. The thing I guess with Sylveon and Amie was the 3DS, we had a touchscreen, so that made sense. So that was sort of linking into the 3DS's architecture. Whereas what you could do with the Switch, probably something related to the Joy-Cons, but you can't always rely on people playing with Joy-Cons detached. Sometimes they are attached to the console, sometimes you have a Pro Controller, so the only thing I could think of was be like shaking any controller you've got, but that's existed for a while now. So who knows exactly. If you guys have any ideas for any particular evolution methods that could be made for the Switch, or just a new evolution method entirely, do let me know down below in the comment section, because I'm all out of ideas for that. So is it likely we get a new evolution in Generation 8? I'd say it's definitely possible and more likely to get one than not, because it fits the pattern. As I said, it always gives exposure for the games. They can say, new evolution never before discovered, and people can be like, whoa, I'm going to check this out now, and actually piques some interest in people. And again, as we've seen, it always highlights a new mechanic or method, so it would be again another, oh, there's a new evolution method introduced, boom, come and see, that sort of thing. It helps link it in. Would we get one evolution or two evolutions? I reckon probably just one. Obviously Sylveon was just a single one, that was just for a new type, fairy type, so you could go back, but what are you going to pair up for these remaining types here? Like Bug and Poison, I suppose? Rock and Ground, I suppose, would make sense, but it just doesn't make sense thematically. I mean, Glaceon and Leafeon don't really link up apart from the evolution methods, so who knows how they could pair them up until we know the evolution method itself. But I'd say likely just to get the one, because it's always good to add longevity to the line, as I mentioned earlier, because then it means they can last over, up to generation 15 and has to have an evolution to introduce, as opposed to running out to generation 12 and then losing an introduction aspect to the series. So that's just my thoughts. Do let me know down below in the comment section if you think we're going to get an evolution in Pokemon Switch in Generation 8, and then obviously an evolution method if you know anything, or have any ideas, I suppose, not know anything, unless you have an uncle that works at Game Freak, in which case do tell. And of course, do let me know which type you'd like to see. Are you looking forward to seeing like a fighting type evolution or a poison, or do you think they're just going to stop evolutions entirely now? Do let me know down below in the comment section. And of course we have next topic to introduce first, or next, or whatever, and that is going to be related to what we talked about, Pokemon Amie and Pokemon Refresh. So what's going to happen to Pokemon Refresh in Pokemon Switch? Of course, it's a touchscreen based system. The Switch does have a touchscreen, however, it's not as nice to use as the 3DS, because the 3DS you have a stylus, the touchscreen on the Switch you have to use your fingers, which I'm very hesitant to. I touch it very little, so we'll have to talk about what's going to happen. Are they going to just reduce the functionality of it? Are they just going to make it controllable with controls, or are they going to remove it entirely? Do let me know down below in the comments section what you think about that. But this will be it for today, so I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.